Oh no.
Oh my god.
Oh no. Oh!
Jesus Christ.
You want me? Come on. Come and get me. Come and get me. Right here. Right here. Come and get me.
Oh.
Aha! Physics. I just love it. The mindless dregs. What do I call these guys? The dregs. Come on, dregs. Let's move. More disturbing photos with disturbing backstories. I'm just gonna say it. This whole series is just gonna make me feel bad, and I know that that's sort of the point of it. You know, it's the strange, dark, and mysterious of Mr. Ballin. But dear Lord, man,
we're kind of regretting starting these at this point.
Huh?
We're kind of regretting starting these at this point.
To a certain extent, yes, but at the same time, there are stories out there that I'm not aware of that interest me very much. But there are stories that I am very well aware of that being reminded of just like, ugh. Not only that, but seeing photos from it, like actual photos from those moments, like the Columbine, the two guys from Columbine, and then the Ed Gein photos from last time. And I know the photo. I saw the thumbnail for this one, and I know exactly what the hell, like who the hell is in the photo, and the outcome of his situation. Honestly, it's both, and plus there was also a movie made about it. I'm sure Mr. Ballin will talk about it, and which
I have one guess already.
What?
Dude that got his arm stuck in the boulder.
No, that's that. I'm not sure if that's another one that they're gonna mention or not, but it's another movie. The situation that this guy was in was actually a little bit more sad, especially because of his lack of awareness of where he was at. You'll see. I mean, I hope that he talks about it in greater detail, but I guess without further ado, let's let Mr. Ballin do his thing.
One thing I kind of wonder, it probably exists.
Hey, I'm going to share with you.
Sorry?
People who have been buried in avalanches.
Yeah.
If anybody had a camera on them, like, and could take pictures while they were buried. Like, some people have dug the wrong direction.
Oh,
ended
man.
up dying because they dug the wrong direction.
Well, yeah.
I wonder if anybody's ever found a camera with photos somebody took on it while buried under ice.
Well, it's just like that Chilean soccer team that Argentinian soccer team that got stranded in the Andes Mountains, and initially only like 6 people died, but then later on even more people died, and the players that were left over, the people who were left over, had to resort to cannibalism and everything. They took the direction down a mountain that they thought would lead them to civilization. If they would have gone the opposite direction, they would have found a completely fully stocked hotel that was abandoned for the season because it was a seasonal hotel, but it was fully stocked and everything, and they would have found it, I think it was only like 8 miles away. So, yeah. Instead, the one guy walked down the mountain for, I think it was 3 days straight with very little food and water, and he made it back to tell them where the survivors were. And it's just like, damn, dude, that's heartbreaking. And also just, you know, when people aren't aware of, like, sometimes people get lucky. Sometimes they do, and when that happens, it's one of the more harrowing, like, inspiring stories. But whenever they don't get lucky and they wind up, you know, treading down the wrong path, it's sad to say, but that's reality doesn't play fair by any standards, and the world is very cruel. But anyway, let's let John do his thing. All right, Mr. Allen, hit it with us.
Today, I'm going to share with you 3 progressively more disturbing stories, and at the end of each of them, I'm going to share with you the picture that is famously associated with them. But before I get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel, because that's all I do, and I upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please convince the like button to go camping on their own on Mount Shasta. Also, please subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories.
Oh, by the way, apparently the person who released this audio was, turns out he was, he had it royalty free, like anyone could use it, anything at all. And turns out YouTube was automatically copyright claiming it. The music, thinking, oh, this is music by someone else and it's being used in this video, therefore it belongs to this person. And turns out YouTube's had that problem now for the last few months, and very slowly they're stopping it on the channels that are royalty free. And it's just, the fact that YouTube does that annoys me, and it caused us a headache for a while. But turns out it wasn't a scammer this time. You remember I told you I was having problems with it here recently? Turns out it wasn't a scammer. Turns out it was just, you know, more bullshit. But oh well.
In 1970, 14-year-old Keith Sapsford was living in Sydney, Australia with his parents, and he was desperate to travel the world. His parents wanted him to be able to travel, they just lacked the resources to be able to afford that kind of thing. However, they were able to pull a little bit of cash, and the 3 of them did go on a nice European vacation that his parents were hoping would kind of calm down his desires to want to travel all the time. They thought this would be, you know, a taste before he got older and he could go travel as much as he wanted. But when he came back from that vacation, it really had the opposite effect. It was like Keith had experienced the life that he so desperately wanted, and now he's home and it's like that life has been taken from him. Following that vacation, Keith began trying to run away from home. Not because he didn't want to be around his parents, but just because he saw it as his only way to, you know, see the world. But every time he would run away, his parents would quickly find him and bring him back home. Their concern for their son would only grow, though, because he would find ways to sneak away and be gone for longer and longer stretches of time, and they're thinking it's only a matter of time before he really gets hurt. In an effort to save their son, they ended up enrolling him in this very strict boarding school that was for boys with behavioral problems, and they were hoping that the staff at the school was going to be able to kind of calm their son down and keep him from trying to run away all the time. But unfortunately, the school really had the opposite effect, because the school, in a sense, was like a prison. You weren't allowed to leave. And so immediately, Keith, when he gets there, he's looking for ways to escape this boarding school, and 2 weeks after arriving, he would be successful. He would elude the staff and he would escape. 3 days after he had escaped this boarding school, he found his way to the Sydney airport. Now, this is the 1970s, and it was far easier to get into an airport than it would be today, where there's lots of security. There wasn't much of that at the time that Keith was at the airport. And so Keith walked across the tarmac to a plane that was bound for Tokyo, and he climbed inside the wheel well. He tucked himself in there, and he waited for takeoff. A photographer named John Gilpin happened to be at the Sydney airport on the same day that Keith is now snuck into that wheel well, and he had a new lens for his camera that he was testing out. And at one point, he was just taking pictures of the tarmac, and he began taking pictures of a plane that was taking off, and it was the same plane that Keith had snuck into. And he takes pictures of it as it takes off, it goes up to altitude, and it flies away. And he just took a series of pictures of it, puts his camera away, doesn't think twice about it. A week later, John was looking through his photos, and he stopped when he saw this picture. John had inadvertently captured the final moments of Keith as he fell nearly 200 feet to his death.
Shit.
As soon as the pilot took off, the wheels were retracted, opening up that wheel well for a brief second, and there was nothing for Keith to hold on to, and he slipped out. But even if he had not fallen out, he almost certainly would have died from freezing temperatures and lack of oxygen.
So that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, because it has to be airtight in order for it to cruise at altitude, and also you're up 30,000 feet, and anyone who tells you for every few thousand feet you go up, the temperature drops more and more and more, and pretty soon you're at 30,000 feet, and it is ball-chillingly cold. I'm talking like almost like sub-zero temperatures in a lot of regards, especially depending on where you're flying to. But Jesus wept, man. That's horrible. The fact that, you know, that kid wanted to see the world, and in his pursuit of it, he basically was just you know, tugged on the wrong end of the tiger's tail, and he fell to his death. That sucks.
On April 1st, 1990, a police officer in Arizona was driving on the highway when he saw a tractor trailer that was pulled over on the side of the road with its hazards on. And so he pulls over, he gets out, walks out to the driver's side door, and he looks up at the driver and says, "Hey, do you need any help?" And the driver is still sitting in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel. He's barely acknowledging the police officer. And he kind of looks down and shrugs and just says, "No, I'm okay." The police officer doesn't know what it was, but there was something off about this guy. He wasn't doing anything wrong, but there was something off about him. He couldn't tell what it was. So he asked him again, "Are you sure that nothing is wrong?" And the driver, again, very sketchy, just says, "No, nothing's wrong." And so the police officer, acting on a gut instinct, says, "Hey, can you step out? Do you mind if I talk to you outside of your vehicle?" And so very reluctantly, the driver kind of slithers his way out of the vehicle, making sure that he doesn't fully open the door to kind of let the officer see what's going on inside his cab. He gets out and shuts the door, and the two start talking. Over the course of their conversation, where basically the officer is trying to figure out what you're doing here. Why are you parked on the side of the road with your hazards on? Why aren't you telling me what's going on? Why are you acting so strange? At some point, the officer just kind of had enough, and he said, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to need to search your vehicle." He opens up the door and goes inside, and there's nothing out of the ordinary in the front two seats. But when he looks into the back section where there was a sleeping compartment, because this is a big 18-wheeler, and there's like a little area in the back of the cab where these guys doing these long drives can sleep. When he looks into that section, he sees there's this woman with her mouth gagged, handcuffed, huddling in the corner of this sleeping section, looking absolutely terrified.
Damn.
The officer immediately gets out and he grabs the guy and he puts him under arrest. As he's arresting him, the driver is saying, "No, she wants to be here. She chose to be here." But the officer didn't buy it. He said, "You're under arrest for kidnapping." The officer puts this guy in his cruiser and shuts the door, and then he calls for backup. When backup arrived, they were able to take the woman out. She was unhurt. She survived. But it would turn out that she was one of the very, very lucky few, because the driver was Robert Rhodes, aka the truck stop killer, who over the previous 20 years had killed over 50 women. He was one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. But the crime that the truck stop killer was actually known for was not this kidnapping where this woman survived. It was the kidnapping and murder of a woman named Regina K. Walters. Regina was a young woman who came from a broken home, and at the age of 14, she ran away and began hitchhiking across Texas with her boyfriend. In February of 1990, Rhodes picked up Regina and her boyfriend, who were looking for a ride. Rhodes almost immediately kills Regina's boyfriend and takes Regina captive, and he keeps her chained up in his traveling torture chamber for several years before ultimately killing her as well. After Rhodes was finally arrested by this Arizona police officer on the side of the highway, the investigation searched Rhodes' house, and they found some pictures. This is a picture of Regina K. Walters in the abandoned barn where her body was ultimately found. Immediately after Rhodes took this picture, he ended Regina's life.
Jesus Christ, man.
Damn, dude.
That dude's fucked.
See, this is why, this and a few select other stories are why people have a bad stigma about truck drivers. And not saying every truck driver is like that, but again, it just, there's people who talk about like horror stories at truck stops and shit like that. And given the fact that we have a few not too far from here, yeah, it's kind of terrifying. Oh yeah, this is... damn, this one still hurts. Because just when you read about this guy and the journey that he went on, it's inspiring, but Dear God.
This story is literally
On
half the
September
video,
6,
pretty much.
1992, two moose hunters that were hunting just outside of Denali National Park in Alaska were walking up to a well-known landmark amongst hunters in the area.
The bus.
It was this old school bus that was parked in the middle of nowhere. It was all rusted over and nature had practically overgrown it. And hunters, trappers, and travelers would use this bus as kind of like a center point that you would reference where you're going relative to this particular bus. But when they walked up to it, they saw on the outside of the door that there was a note. Attention possible visitors, SOS, I need your help. I am injured, near death, and too weak to hike out of here. I am all alone. This is not a joke. In the name of God, please remain to save me. I am out collecting berries close by and shall return this evening. Thank you, Chris McCandless. Dated August ? 5 months earlier in April.
He had no reference of time at that point. He was delirious and just, oh man. God, dude.
April of 1992, Chris McCandless, the one who wrote that note, had hitchhiked from Carthage, South Dakota to Fairbanks, Alaska. Once there, he hitchhiked again with an electrician named Jim Gallion who was making his way out of Fairbanks. Chris introduced himself as Alex and asked Jim if he would take him to Denali National.
He used that name Alex because he thought he didn't like his birth name because he didn't like his parents. So he renamed himself Alexander Supertramp. and
Guessing
he
based off the band, or
I
was
think
the band based off of him?
I don't know. Hold on. Let's. Sorry to pause and wiki real quick, everybody. Let's take a look. Supertramp. Probably, yeah. He probably got it from the band Supertramp, because Chris had a very eclectic music, and he was a talented musician too. He could actually play the piano and sing pretty good, but just, oh man. Anyway, sorry.
National Park, which was about 2 hours away to the southwest. On the drive, Jim asked Chris what he was going to be doing at the park, because this is like wild Alaska country, and frankly, Chris did not look like a rugged Alaskan outdoorsman. Chris told Jim that he was going to be living off the land for a few months. Jim would later say that he had serious doubts about Chris's ability to survive in the Alaskan bush. As it was, Chris only had a light backpack, did have a rifle, but he really didn't have warm clothes on. He only had 10 pounds of rice. That was the only thing he brought for food. He didn't have a compass. He didn't have a map. He didn't have a watch. He just seemed totally ill-equipped for what he was saying he was going to go do. At some point, Jim tried to convince Chris not to go.
I don't even want to go out in the Alaskan wilderness while I'm well-equipped, to be honest.
And that's why most people recommend, like, if you do go out in the wilderness like that, not even Alaska, if you go out in the wilderness, nature does not play by your rules. Nature doesn't apply to what you think needs to happen.
The Boy Scout motto was be prepared.
Yes, always be prepared. And
it's not just a cool Disney song. It's a good piece of advice for going into the wilderness.
Yes, and I would love to say that if Chris would have been more prepared, he would have lived, but I don't know. According to a lot of people, Chris was a very smart and a very knowledgeable person who was more than capable of surviving almost any situation that he was in, but these are the most dire situation, one of the most dire situations you can find yourself in.
Yeah.
It
almost sounds like he probably underestimated Alaska.
He did, drastically.
So he may have been smart about, he could probably go out on the Appalachian Trail and be just fine for an indefinite amount of time, but he probably just didn't anticipate exactly how different Alaska is from the rest of the United States. Well,
yeah, Alaska, very mountainous, very, very, in terms of nature, very unforgiving. The Appalachian Trail has its hard spots, but the difference is there's a lot of civilization along the Appalachian Trail that you can hop off, go, get a good night's sleep in a hotel, get something good to eat. If you're hurt, there's places you can go to get medical treatment. Out in the Alaskan wilderness, I'm talking hundreds of miles in every direction, there's nothing. That's the difference. See, civilization, You know, people talk about civilization being like a crux of like a hindrance to nature's beauty. And while I do agree with it to a certain degree, especially if there's an overreach, society and civilization is necessary to the survival of the human species, especially when you are in dire circumstances like this. Anyway, sorry.
And he even offered, hey, I'll drive you up to Anchorage and I'll buy you equipment. You need the right equipment for what you're going to be doing. Let's go there first. But Chris was stubborn, and so Jim ultimately relented and said, okay. He drove him to the park. Before Chris left, Jim actually gave him a pair of warm boots that he had in his truck. He said, here, you can use these more than I can. And Chris thanked him, took his boots, and he was on his way. Although Chris was planning for this extensive hike through Denali National Park all the way to the Bering Sea, but Chris would only make it about 20 miles into his journey before stopping at an old rusted bus just outside of the park. Chris would live in this bus for 16 weeks, and according to his diary, that first week he was there was particularly rough. He was snowed in, he couldn't catch anything to eat, so he's hungry and cold, but shortly thereafter he developed a routine. He was able to hunt successfully for some small game. He found some plants that were good to eat, and by and large his entries made it seem like he was very happy. However, the last month of diary entries really painted a very different picture. After living in this bus for nearly 3 months, he indicated in his diary that he was kind of sick and tired of living off the land and he was ready to return back to society. So on July 3rd, he packs up his camp and he starts walking back the 20 miles towards where he came into the park in the first place. But when he came into the park 3 months earlier, the river that he was going to need to cross was frozen. And now that he's returning in the summer, it had thawed, and now it's the 75-foot wide raging river that was basically impossible to cross.
Ah, crap.
Yeah. He trapped himself, basically, because seasons are, like, you talk about seasonal extremes. We have them here to a certain degree. Up there, it's a whole new world.
So he's trapped on the wrong side of this river. What he didn't know, because he didn't have a compass, he didn't have a map, he didn't know the area well, was there was actually a hand-operated tram that would take you across the river in the summer that was only a mile away from his camp, that was labeled on almost every map.
Yeah.
Fuck.
If he would have had the
Had
knowledge,
a map with him, he would have been like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like, oh, there's a tram right there. Okay.
Literally the simplest things I've done. Be prepared, the Boy Scout motto.
Yes.
I know you can't always be prepared, but be prepared to the best of your ability. Like, obviously, if a plane crashes you in the Alaskan wilderness and you survive the plane crash, there's only so much preparedness you can be in that situation. But before you leave the wreckage, if it's safe enough anyways, I would try to find everything on board you can find that will help you, too.
Map, supplies, anything. Knowledge is the biggest thing that will keep you, that will get you through that. And honestly, if
that's
you're not,
a lot of what the Boy Scouts go off of, is they're actually giving you the kind of knowledge you would need. Like if you find yourself in a bare bones situation, you still have a fighting chance.
Absolutely.
It's technically, I think that if I am trapped in a bare bones situation with nothing and I really need to make fire, I'm probably fucked. But if I at least have a bit of rope or string, I can actually bow drill a fire. I know how to do that.
I've done that before as well.
It sucks and it's hard to do, but it's doable.
Yeah, and fire is very necessary.
And I've seen people do it just like this, and I don't think that's possible because they teach you to do it with a bow.
The bow makes it easier. The bow, you basically are making a drill that no matter what direction you're going, it's always drilling down. And thus, the friction will cause embers, and that's what will start the fire. Whereas doing this, you actually, you're limited to, like, how far you go down. That's what they teach you. You know, whenever you're doing it, go down. Like, press down to add more friction to cause embers. The one guy, I forget what his channel is called now. He actually, the dude who like builds the huts out of clay and shit like that in like the Australian wilderness. He actually does that. He does the bow one, but he shows you like it is very possible to do it hand drill, and it just takes time, like most things. And anyway, but.
In addition, there was a hunting cabin not far from that tram that's also on just about every map of this particular area. That had food, it had clothes, it had bedding. He could have stayed in this hunting cabin until conditions were okay again to make the journey back home. But again, he doesn't have a map, so he doesn't know these things exist. So at some point, he turns around and goes back to the bus, feeling totally dejected. That night, his journal entry just said, "Reined in, river looks impossible, lonely, scared." All of Chris's diary entries following his return to the bus after not being able to cross this river got shorter and bleaker and really painted a picture of a guy that was going downhill. The final entry in Chris's diary just says, "Beautiful blue berries." And then 19 days after his final entry is when those two moose hunters find this bus and see the note, the SOS note, pinned to the outside. The hunters go inside the bus, and there, laying in a sleeping bag, is the body of Christopher McCandless. Although it's not entirely clear how Christopher actually died, the two most common theories are either starvation or perhaps he ingested a poisonous plant seed. The hunters alerted authorities who came out and they launched an investigation, and during this investigation they found Chris's camera. Chris was an avid photographer. He had taken loads of pictures over the course of his stay out in the wild. This is the final picture that he took on his camera. It's evident from Chris's SOS note on his door that he did want to escape. He wanted to leave the wild. But what's also clear is that at the end, he realized he wasn't going to. The note he's holding in his hand says, "I have had a happy life, and thank the Lord, goodbye, and may God bless all." And so
Damn.
Yeah. And this is just the end of his journey. The chronicling of his entire journey that's backed up by the people that he met along the way is nothing short of amazing. And
so he took one last dignified picture of himself before curling up in his sleeping bag and passing away. Let me know what you thought of these stories in the comments section, and I will pin the best comment at the top. If you enjoyed today's story and you haven't done this already, please tell the like button to go camping on their own on Mount Shasta. Also, please subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. If you want to get in touch with me, you can direct message me on Instagram or on Twitter. My username for both platforms is the same. It's JohnBallin416. I also have a ton of content over on TikTok where my username is Mr. Ballin. If you have a story suggestion, please submit it to our subreddit. It's just called Mr. Ballin. It's linked in the description below. If I use your suggestion on purpose, I will credit you. So whether I see you on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, some combination, just know that I really appreciate your support. And until next time, guys, that's going to do it. See ya.
Have we watched the one on Mount Shasta yet? She said, tell the like button to go camping by itself on Mount Shasta.
I don't think so.
So, I wonder what Mount Shasta is.
I don't know.
Bonus footage?
Yeah, this is a first. Oh.
What do you think, alligator boy?
Oh, look at it. Oh. It's like, dear God, it's like Jacob. Jacob just had a baby, and little baby Damien, he is so precious, and he's a loudmouth. I love that kid. Got to hold him. He's super cute and everything, and that's awesome. Congrats, John. I know it's a bit late because this is 2 years ago, but congrats on your happy, healthy baby, man.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's good. Definitely gonna have shadows.
I don't care.
All right.
Full send.
Come on, buddy.
There you go.
It's recording.
Oh.
Wow. What the hell are you doing to me?
But okay. But like I was saying about about Chris McCandless, his life was dramatized into a movie. It's called Into the Wild, and he's played by Emil Hirsch, and the film, it dramatizes a few things, but for the most part, it's brutally honest about what his life was like, and it paints him as a flawed human who basically he's not like this angelic figure that, is like, oh, he represents, the spirit of freedom and, all that. It's like, no, he's a very flawed person who was just trying to figure his life out. I mean, basically, he came from a very rich family. Very rich. His dad was a rocket scientist who had a few patents with the U.S. government and made a shit ton of money off of it. And also the sad fact about his existence, him and his sister, was that they were born out of wedlock, and thus they did not know any of their extended family outside of their mother and their father, because they came from a very religious place, and they were bastards. So, and that's something that also contributed to his desire to go somewhere else. Also, his parents fought a lot and basically just hated being around each other, but yet they were with each other because of convenience. That's really all it was. And after he graduated college, he took the money that he had left over from like his scholarship and all that, which was like several thousands of dollars, and he basically just donated it, drove his car down to the middle of nowhere. It was like a desert area, and then his car got totaled, or not, it didn't get totaled. His car got damaged really badly in a flash flood, and he just started walking. And he goes on all these journeys throughout the American West, the Midwest. He meets up with a caravan of hippies a few times. Like, meets up with them initially while they're traveling somewhere, and they tell him, "Oh, this is usually where we set up during this time of year. So if you ever want to find us, this is where we'll be." And thus he goes there and he finds them again and reconnects with them, and it's a very beautiful story. And I think anyone who wants to check out a more
That's our roommates.
I think they are. I think they're back. So
if that's not a roommate, somebody just come in our house that's not supposed to be here.
Yeah, we'll have to check on that. But we're going to end it here, everybody. I recommend anyone check out the movie Into the Wild. It is a great film. It is very, very, it's a very well-told story. And I guess until next time, everybody, signing off, I'm Nate.
I am Nick.
We'll see y'all later, everybody. Peace.